Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to our segment here on Concord Community Television. I'm meeting today with Rebecca McWilliams, a candidate for state rep here in the town of Concord, and we're chatting about a few issues of interest and concern for some people, and we're covering a few topics. I think we'd like to spend a little time maybe on healthcare. So,
Awesome.
I know that recently in the news we've heard a lot going on with respect to this opioid crisis that seems to be beleaguering our state. What are your thoughts on this, and how does that fold into the greater healthcare topic?
Absolutely. I would call it an opioid epidemic. At this point, everyone knows someone who's been impacted by opioid misuse in New Hampshire. And that's scary. It really is hitting home with a lot of families. I think the first thing we need to do is make sure that we are treating this as a healthcare issue. This is not a criminal issue. We don't need to be penalizing and imprisoning people who are misusing opioids. We really need to be focusing on helping them with addiction issues. And so part of that is making sure that we have the tools as a state to address this. And I am not an expert when it comes to how to handle this kind of an epidemic, but certainly at the state level, my heart is with the families that have been impacted. And I know people who've been impacted. I think the really scary part is it's still going on. We have received some federal funding to the state to try to make a difference. So as a legislator, my interest is really in tracking where are we spending those funds, and then staying on top of where is it really helping. So is that opening new treatment centers? Is it the facilities that we need in different locations around the state? Is it hiring more mental health counselors? Because honestly, we're losing a lot of talented mental health counselors out of state where people pay them more. So unfortunately, we don't have enough and we don't pay them well enough, and we're trying to struggle with a Band-Aid to make this work. So figuring out where to spend the funds and then making sure that it's a good use of funds, and if necessary, continuing to fund the fight against opioid misuse. So I think that there's a multi-pronged approach, and I'm all for making sure that it's working because we can't continue to live like this. We've got a lot of families who the sole breadwinner suddenly is unable to work, be it from opioid misuse or some other situation, losing a child to opioid misuse, or a child who is currently struggling with it and is now in the prison system, and the sole breadwinner is completely unable to work because they're dealing with this situation. Honestly, the best thing we can do is pass Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, which almost passed last session of the House, and I absolutely want to make sure that it passes this session, because when these families are impacted, they need to be able to take some time and address the issues rather than struggling and potentially going bankrupt with what's going on.
Good thoughts there. Previously, we had spent a little time discussing education. Do you see a role in the public school system here to provide messaging and support for our younger citizens before they reach an age where this might directly impact them or their friends?
Well, in some cases, this is happening to kids who are still in school. They get hooked regardless of the age, and their families are devastated when they find out, hopefully before it's too late. I do think that education is a part of this. I certainly think that we can use the tools we have to spread information, including health class, to talk about issues of addiction. I don't think that should be a taboo word, because at this point it's so ingrained in our society, it's something that everyone has dealt with. And certainly opioids are not the only issue in New Hampshire. We do have a serious issue with alcohol addiction as well in the state, and we rarely talk about it. So this is really addressing mental health issues under the healthcare system rather than treating them as something you brush under the carpet or put people in prison for.
Okay. I also understand that a number of families are concerned about the rapid increase in costs of healthcare in general. What could you do as a state rep to maybe address this concern or slow down, possibly reverse that trend?
Yeah, I think every household is worried about health care when it comes time to negotiate health care with their employer, or if you're like me and a small business owner, come up with a plan that can cover you and your family. Or if you're low income and you need to have coverage, figure out if it's going to cover your conditions and your needs, or if you're going to need to piece together something to pay out of pocket and get coverage. For me, I feel that right now we have limited options for plans to choose in New Hampshire, and I think that it would make a lot of sense for the state, on a state level, to look at states around us that are doing a really good job. So if we look at Massachusetts, they have the Mass Health Connector. It's working. Everyone in Massachusetts is required to have some form of health care, or they pay a penalty for not having it. What I'd like to do is invite the Mass Health Connector to become one of the providers for New Hampshire residents. So it's an option they could choose in addition to other plans in the state, like Anthem, Blue Cross, etc. So once the Health Connector is in New Hampshire, people can choose to enroll through their business individually. It's one more option. Because let's face it, if someone in your family is diagnosed with a really serious condition, they're going to end up going to Boston and the best hospitals in the US to get treated, and that's great, and it should be covered, but we might as well then partner with a system that is already providing that level of care. The same thing happens when we have tourists who are coming up from Massachusetts and go skiing and break a leg and have to go to a clinic.
Not too many, I hope.
I hope not, but it happens. So the Mass Health Connector will pay for their clinic visit even though it's out of state. If we were to treat New England as its own healthcare coverage, and let's not worry about what's happening at the federal level, we could make huge strides by coupling with a state that's already doing this.
That sounds reasonable.
We'll see.
I think looking for a fresh start or new ideas is a good idea in general for our legislative body. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Rebecca McWilliams, again, running as a candidate for a state rep here in Concord with some ideas on healthcare.